Welcome to the Liberate Humanity podcast, Ryan Burton.
Yeah, nice to meet you, Yuval.
Basically, me and Ryan, we don't know each other almost at all. I've been hearing about him and his experience from Kelvin for a while now, and it sounded extremely wild, epic, and really, really interesting. So here he is on the podcast, and I'm getting to know him just like you guys listening to this. And yeah, Ryan just shared that he started his journey at 16, and I love the mirroring has already started because he was speaking about how before that he just wanted to fuck girls and do drugs, and it sounded a lot like my earlier version of myself somewhere in the timeline. So yeah, I'm really interested, like, how do you see your journey, when it unlocked itself to you, when you actually realized, self-actualized, and was like, there's a lot of moments, key moments, but if you're trying to maybe like just pinpoint that moment, or maybe a few moments that led to that thing,
It's interesting. From where I am now, it's like my life and world ended. So it's pretty. Yeah, it's interesting to like go back through the years because on interviews people ask me, and it's a lot of the time it's strange. The past feels like very, very far away, but I also remember everything like it was yesterday at the same time. I'm sure all of you or a lot of people feel that too.
Yeah.
But more so in my case because of the disidentification that happened in later stages of awakening. And just to be clear, I don't claim to be a Buddha or fully realized or whatever. I still get annoyed. Like if I'm late for a meeting and I'm in traffic, I could definitely get annoyed. I'm just like, why? Like, why couldn't I be more organized today? Right?
You know what?
Yeah.
I don't think the Buddha or any spiritual master was in that state that we as a collective project, that there's no such thing like no triggers as a human being. I don't believe in that.
So, yeah, just to recap it, I'm half Thai, so my mother's from Thailand. She came here in the late 80s, and my dad's American, or grew up in Iowa.
Where is here, by the way? Because I feel like
I'm in
didn't,
LA.
Yeah, I didn't introduce you, so maybe we can give a little background about you, and feel free to stop me and get to the details, because what I know about Ryan is a meditation teacher, and is helping people in different awareness states, let's call it like that, different focus states, or I don't know what's the exact term, but basically you've been very, very deep for many years into spirituality, and I've heard that you're very deep in the out of body experiences. I also hear that you're deep into Buddhism. Am I right?
Uh-huh.
So yeah, feel free to elaborate about all that stuff before we begin. Like your background.
Yeah, so as a kid, I for summer camps when I was young, like 5, 6, my parents would send me to this temple in North Hollywood, which is a city here in LA, and I would learn Thai there. So that was my first exposure to Buddhism, at least the Buddha statue. And as kids, they would just have us like sit down in front of the statue and be quiet, and then we start our day with like the school with learning Thai and all that. So that was my first contact with Buddhism. and monks and nuns, but I didn't learn anything about it, you know. My mom and grandmother and Thai side of the family, it's like they're Buddhist by default, kind of the same way that in some countries you're Muslim or Christian by default. So yeah, I was mostly an atheist. I think I was open to, like, you know, maybe an afterlife or maybe these spiritual things exist, but I wasn't concerned with them, you know. I was really just having fun as a kid, and, you know, just did all the things that normal teenage American boys do, skateboarding and all of that, and getting high and drunk all the time. So, and yeah, but one night one night changed everything. I was alone and I took an eighth of mushrooms, and as part of my practice now, entheogens or psychedelics they're not part of what I teach. You know, people ask me about them all the time. Should I do this? Should I do that? I don't tell people what they can or can't do as a teacher, you know, but it's not a part of what I teach. So, but anyways, I ate a whole eighth to myself alone. And at first everything was okay, you know, and then I went into the bathroom and I
How,
looked in the mirror.
how much is that in grams? I'm sorry, I'm not American.
3.5.
First time.
Yeah,
God damn.
I
That's
know.
brave.
I didn't know it was brave at the time, right?
Yeah, I bet.
I was just being stupid. Anyway, so I'm looking in the mirror and never had any supernatural experiences in my life, right? I mean, I think before that I dreamt of something before it happened, and that was kind of really weird. And my mom and grandma have always dreamt of things before they've happened, so I was familiar with it, but it was not anything that, like, my materialist worldview or, you know, philosophical background could understand. Like, I had read
Yeah.
Plato and whatever, you know.
It's really
So
funny. It's like people, you know, they have these experiences when they're not into spirituality, but we don't really bring any awareness to it. We don't really mind, you know. It's like, yeah,
right, yeah, exactly. That doesn't make sense. Just put it on the shelf, you know. So I look in the mirror and my eyes turn black, like totally black,
whoa.
and I proceed to have the most horrendous experience of my life. I mean, pure terror, dude. No hope. Just lost in time. And I became everyone that ever touched that mushroom. So it was a totally non-local experience. And I was taken into Aztec hells and dismembered. It was, yeah, at one point, I mean, I didn't believe in evil before that night. Had no context, no contact with anything dark. And that darkness swallowed me up. And it corrected almost everything about my life. Like, all the stuff all the things I was messing around with, lying, cheating, stealing, everything. Whatever was, like, even closely resonant to that thing I had become. After the trip, I just said, I'm letting go of all of this. But the non-locality, the experiencing multiple realities simultaneously and being multiple beings simultaneously, that was not something I knew that consciousness even had a function or capacity for. I'd never experienced anything like this. So it made me very interested in lucid dreaming and out-of-body experiences and, you know, further experimentation with psychedelics. So I did that for the first couple of years, and when I started more formal Buddhist meditation training, my teachers at the time were like, "Hey, you really gotta, if you want to really stabilize your mind and become focused and develop mindfulness and experience meditation, you gotta put all these distractions to the side." And they're all my teachers are very traditional. You know, they were monks or like Taoists. Taoist
Yeah.
masters that went through traditional old school training. So I have a very solid background in traditional approaches to meditation and practice. So yeah, soon after this whole process really began for me, when I was 19, my dad passed away, and that introduced like a whole new element to the journey and everything. So
Wow. That's really wild. Like losing a close person, it's like such a profound experience.
yes,
I can't really imagine like how you felt, because each time I just imagined how it would feel to lose my dad, I can be extremely triggered just by the thought.
yeah, I still remember. I loved my dad very much, and he had his issues with drugs, and that's ultimately what um took his life in the end. So, or led to the end of his life. So yeah, awakening, suffering is often the catalyst for deep awakening. It makes us wonder and ask like the big questions. When my dad died, it put so many things into perspective. I realized that the anger that I let get between us was useless. And I always assumed that uh, they'd be able to save him somehow. And when I watched him die, like all of those dreams and all of that hope that I had died with him. And that's when the real training began. My in Thai culture, when like tragedies happen, everyone sits around the elder. And that was my grandmother, and she was sitting on a couch, and we're all on our knees, like, with our hands in prayer posture around her, and she's like putting her hand on my mom's head and my aunt's head, and my mom and aunt were crying, and she was crying, and everyone was so broken. And she put her hand on my head, and she looked at me, and she said, "Ryan, your father's dead, and today you become a man." So I was very fortunate to have some of these, major initiations into the different phases of life through my family and through this practice. So after I lost him, it really started this period of first I didn't know up from down anymore. I was very numb, and the meditation didn't help. So I sought teachers and healers, and one of them was a healer, and so funny. I remember the first time I came to him. He could see my heart center, and he was very clairvoyant. And my delusion was so confused at the time. I just couldn't see what was right in front of me and what was what anymore. And he looked at me and he paused, and he said, "You have a lot of anger inside you." And I looked at him and I said, "Really?" Like that's how divorced from reality I became. That's how
Yeah.
numb I became. And
Wow.
so it took about 7 years to like get my head back on straight, and I joined cults, done all kinds of practices and meditations, and I met all kinds of people.
You're actually
Yeah,
the second guest I'm having here that joined the cult. That's interesting pattern.
yeah, yeah. I didn't know it was a cult initially.
Nobody knows.
Nobody knows at the start. Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's funny. It's funny how that works. And right. So for 7 years, I did a lot of meditation. I mean, I don't know how many thousands of hours, in excess of 5,000 probably.
Ooh, wow.
Yeah, yeah.
Meditation
It's not a
teacher,
lot.
I hear. So I guess, yeah, you must
Well,
have.
apparently, apparently I'm a teacher. Yeah, something like that. Right. So 7 years of practice passes, and during those 7 years, I really just couldn't get any stability in my life. I was a mess. Changed jobs every year. Dropped out of college. one relationship after the next, just trying to find some peace, you know.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
know.
I was really broken. And one day I received the grace of the Lord.
What do you mean by that?
I read a line in a book called Talks by Ramana Maharshi, and it said, "Liberation is to know that you were never born." And I don't know what, like, I couldn't understand that sentence. I just started shaking, just started sweating, you know, trembling
No,
on an airplane.
it just affected you, like
Huh?
the words.
Yeah, I didn't know what they meant, but it was like scrambling my brain. I didn't know what was going on, and then after
Uh,
5 minutes, it just passed. You know?
I feel like some part of you must have understood what it meant.
Oh, for sure. So the next day I'm driving to work, and at the time I was a loan officer, so I worked for a mortgage broker. And on the 5 North, man, has a freeway that goes through California. Yeah, my heart cracked open, and I didn't know where my hands began and where the steering wheel started. I felt my mind merge with every person that was on that freeway. Like, my heart just exploded in this cosmic bliss. And there was a direct recognition of consciousness. And I was no longer a person. I was no longer in time. I was no longer Ryan. I was free. And that lasted like 10 days. So for 10 days, this God presence was broken and uninterrupted. More or less, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, it sounds like
Yes.
this sentence was what you actually felt in these 10 days, like in the embodiment.
Yeah. So at night, all kinds of strange out-of-body experiences happened. I only had to sleep 2 hours a night. The mind just was so quiet, and deities and all kinds of things, you know, appeared at night for those 10 days. And yeah, my left brain functioning was not really possible. I kept making mistakes on loan applications, and you know, my boss was like, "What the hell is wrong with you? Like, what is wrong with you?" And all I could do was just say, "I don't know," you know. And it was so interesting. I saw so clearly. It was like I could see it's like I could see into his soul, and I saw that, you know, all the wealth and everything that he was chasing, he was just trying to get away from the poverty of his youth. And I saw that really everyone is just chasing things. This whole cycle of human incarnation and this entire enterprise of human civilization is just one big immortality project. It's attempting to perpetuate the self and the biological organism forward in time. That's all that this is.
I need to understand what you just said.
Everything that humans try to do is a fight against death. You know, the desire for fame is essentially the desire to want to be remembered after you
Yeah.
die.
And you connect, like in your perspective, you see everything we do connected to fighting with death?
Not everything. You know, art is often expression. You know, like some things aren't necessary. Not everything is like trying to get away from death, but I mean all the stuff that humans have built. You know, the towers and all the technologies. It's really just a way to prolong life. And I saw that there is no life. Like, life is this dream. And in those 10 days, I awoke from the dream of my life, and I was never the same. So on the 10th day, because it was this state where you're everything. And on the 10th day, I remember I called my best friend, Ricardo, one of my best friends. I told him, dude, it happened. I meditated for 7 years up to this point, right? And he was like the only guy that I really meditated a lot with back then. And I said, Ricardo, it happened. And he's like, what happened? And I was like, I entered supreme liberation. So in that moment, my personality self was emerging, and it was starting to claim that state.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I know.
it was starting to creep back in. Yeah, right.
Like you're talking about like how the egos
Yeah, yeah.
to uh
Return. So literally as soon as I began to claim it as mine, the mind had come back. The next morning I woke up, present shut down, and it was like it never happened. So it was like, yeah, it was like being kicked out of the Garden of Eden, banished
yeah.
from perfection.
Oh,
Right?
you're thinking you enlightened? Let's show you.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, God, reality is like, boy, sit down.
Mhm.
Yeah, sit the fuck down. That's what that was. And so that's what happened, and it initiated this process of some days the personality structure would be in the forefront, and other days the presence would be in the forefront, and there was really this dance between the ego structure and reality, the awakening, and that lasted 3 years or so, and it resolved itself. It resolved itself at some point. I was reading a commentary on a sutra, early Buddhist discourse called the Bahia Sutta. So
Mhm.
it's a discourse between the Buddha and one of his monks.
Mm.
And the Buddha tells the monk that he should train himself like this. In seeing, there is only what is seen. In hearing, there is only what is heard. In feeling, there is only what is felt. In cognizing or thinking, there is only what is cognized. This being so, Bahia, you are neither here nor there, not in this world nor the next, nor between the two. This alone is the end of suffering. And I read this discourse so many times, as a Theravada practitioner. Never did anything, but I read a modern commentary on it by a guy named, his Dharma name is Lessness. His name's John Tan, and he explained how when he was reading the Bahia Sutta, he had been in the same stage that I was in, this I am everything thing, this eternal witness stage, or eternal witness configuration of enlightenment, of awakening. And he said he was studying this sutta, this discourse, and one day in a Zen hall or something, he heard a gong strike. And in that moment, he realized that awareness was not hearing the sound. Awareness was the sound. Like up until that point, he experienced his conception, his perception was that mind and experience are two separate things. That the mind is somehow this eternal presence that is a something, like this void background being, but it's also everything at the same time. That's exactly what the case was for me. But when he heard this gong strike, it collapsed, that background, and there was only hearing, only seeing, only tasting, only feeling, only touching. And all contact, all experience itself was pure illumination, pure enlightenment. And I was reading this, and like right as I'm seeing my mind play out this striking of the gong, and this like thing where awareness collapsed into the foreground of experience, it was it was like a moment between moments. It was so interesting. And then ding, this grandfather clock goes off in my mother's house,
What
and
happened?
beingness
Oh,
witnessing.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you for like 2
It's
seconds.
okay. I was pausing. Beingness witnessing consciousness, it just collapsed into the foreground of experience. Duality collapsed, separateness collapsed, and everything woke up. The walls were meditating. The characters on the TV were meditating. My hands were meditating. My eyes blinking were meditating. everything was meditating. And I just got up off the couch. I was like, there's no way this is going to last. No way. I went into the shower. Drops from the shower are awake. Everything was awake.
That's an interesting thought. Usually what I hear when people experience this stuff, they have this idea that it's going to last forever.
Well, I already had a previous phase of awakening. So in that first one, I thought it was it. This was done, you know? I thought it was, that's why I called my best friend and I said, hey, it's over.
Yeah.
Oh, but this time when this happened, there was no reaching that the mind was doing to claim it. If anything, there was doubt. There was like, there's no way this is gonna last.
Yeah. Oh, I see now.
And that was I don't know. That was some years ago. Yeah, so that was that.
Interesting. I need to pause for a minute to pee, and I'm gonna just tell you the question I'm gonna ask it so you can think about it. I'm really curious right now because mushrooms obviously accelerated your progression, and I'm curious, why is it that it is not a part of your teaching? You talked about that experience with mushrooms, and I was very curious, what made you exclude psychedelics out of your practice or maybe teachings?
Well, I don't actively do them, so there's not really a way to include it. And after my initial experiences, part of my training was celibacy and not taking any substances. So I think that being like the initial foundation for me, it just made me like not particularly interested in them. And then because of the near-death experience I had when I was 18, I was really like, okay, I think I've taken this as far as it can go. So, but don't get me wrong, like plant medicines and entheogens, like the therapeutic benefit is incredible. I know that, and there's so much that you can learn from those teachers.
Honestly, I didn't want to bring any agenda. I was just really curious because I can see a lot of danger in psychedelics, and it sounded to me like you've been in that dangerous path. So I was curious.
Oh yeah. It's not that I don't discourage people from taking them because of danger. You know, like that's not why. It's just this captures it pretty well. So I had there's a teacher that I met a few months before he died. His name was Peter Brown. He was a non-dual teacher, and he gave this deathbed sermon. It was only 6 minutes. He said this. You know, people ask me if I should take this drug or take that drug or do this or do that, or go here or go there or learn from this teacher. Doesn't matter. The only thing that matters is what is actually the case, which is that experience, presence, consciousness, reality is uninterrupted and continuous. In a psychedelic state, reality, consciousness is configured differently than the waking state or than your ordinary, state. But these are all fundamentally modes of the same thing. Reality just appears differently depending on whether you're awake, whether you're dreaming, what plane of consciousness you're in, what reality has been opened up. In the case of entheogens or plant medicines. But fundamentally, they're all this single state that we call experience. So when that became clear for me, it's like there just wasn't an emphasis on that. I've taught people to have out-of-body experiences and to do lucid dreaming because that's something that they actually have to develop. And then after they are able to develop that, then they have that as an accessible skill or like as an accessible capacity. And Kelvin here is a great example of that. He's done OBEs and he's had higher self-contact and all that now as a result. So that is more like, I like to give people things that they can work with in time, and that can actually become realities that they can walk in just by directing their attention and just by focusing on that. And I'm not a entheogen shaman or whatever, so that's just not part of what I do.
I see.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you focused on the tools that you felt was the most effective for you, and you learned to be very skilled at, I guess. Because I know Kelvin for a while now, and before, like, I don't know how many times, but when I first knew him, he didn't have this skill at all. And in our conversations, I hear all the time, constantly for a while now, about his experiences. And for me, with my tools, it really interested me because I have this connection with the divine, and I've been talking for a while now with my, I don't know who it is exactly. I didn't really get names, but I call it a soul, a source, a guidance, whatever.
Right.
I honestly didn't really care. I don't care that much about who it is. But the thing is, with the stories I've been hearing from Kelvin, the experiences are so direct, so profound and magical and important, because I feel like guidance is so key in this life. So I'm really curious, what made you, like, how did you get into OBEs? Like, you said you had this NDE?
Yeah, I got into OBEs and I started practicing lucid dreaming and then out-of-body experience after the shrooms when I was 16. So because I focused like pretty intensely for a year, I was doing wake back to bed and reality checks and all the lucid dreaming and out-of-body practices for a year. It took me 3 months to have my first out-of-body experience. And because I did that initial work in the beginning, it really characterized the rest of my unfoldment. So I always had contact with non-physical beings and non-physical teachers and things like that as a result. So I love how you talk about guidance. What really shifted in my OBE process was that after, I think, 10 years of OBEs, maybe more, I began to have these strange, I call them dream simulations or simulation dreams, where the first one that was very noticeable was I was in a dark parking garage and this little demon monster was running at me. And so I did the Buddhist thing to do, which is to radiate loving kindness. And the thing just like ripped my throat out and, ended me. And then the dream rewound. So then I was back where I was. The demon was running towards me again, and my memory had been recycled. So I didn't know that this was happening for the second time. So now that this little thing is running at me and I try to fight it, it defeats me, rips my throat out. And now, again, it's a third time this thing's running at me, and I decide to like open my mouth and I just eat the guy. And when I eat this demon, the parking garage becomes illuminated. My lucidity turns on. So now I'm actually lucid in this dream. And I remember that my memory was rewound 3 times. And and the screen appears, and the screen says something along the lines of the voice we hear in childhood that tells us we can do incredible things, that we can help people, that we can change the world. That voice is never lost. It's only drowned out, suffocated by the voices of the world, by the opinions and ideas of other people. And then I woke up from that, and my first question was, what the hell was able to press the rewind button? How's that possible? Dude, I'm telling you, I've encountered so many beings, man. None of them can do that. None of them. So I started to wonder, what rewound the tape loop in consciousness and what was speaking to me through the screen.
And what is time even after such a experience?
Right. Yeah, exactly. So I began to wonder, what that was. And of course, the answer is guidance. The answer is higher self. The answer is God. These are all the answers that people said, voice, silence, whatever. And I was like, okay, but that doesn't tell me what it is, right? I want to know what it is. What is this thing that's speaking? And I discovered what it was that was speaking. So,
Really?
yeah. It took some
interesting.
time, but yeah.
Yeah.
So
me and Kelvin just had this talk yesterday, I think, about like who is it that's speaking? And personally, I don't know. Maybe I wasn't curious enough, but it seems that it's possible to know.
oh yeah, it's possible. So the mind or experience, reality, consciousness it's layered. Like this is the physical layer. The dream reality is you can call it a layer below or layer within, right? So a few layers down, quote down. I mean, there's not really down, but layers in. That word doesn't make sense either. But let's just say a few layers in.
Just for like sake of using communicating.
There is this thing called higher self or God at the personal level. So when Arjuna meets Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita, that's a example of this higher self contact of experiencing the voice. And in Arjuna's case, he received the different limbs of yoga, the different paths to realization, and then Krishna gives him a discourse on non-duality and the unborn nature of consciousness. So that exists for every person. It's just that this guidance is not, like you can hear it or you experience it through intuition at the physical level, but when you're able to recede back through the layers of consciousness, you're able to meet this, or it's able to actually appear as well. It takes a form. Your deeper level, your deeper layer makes contact with the layer here, the physical layer, and we call that contact with God or contact with the higher self.
Yeah. When basically contact with God is everything we do and everything that ever was done.
Yeah, because that's definitely more of the absolute, like, large picture, right? That everything is awake, everything is this perfection. So, but I wanted to know exactly what was rewinding the dreams. And I found that what we consider higher self or guidance is actually multi-layered. It's not a singular bandwidth or a singular level. So I experienced or discovered multiple iterations or configurations of that.
So what you're saying basically, if I understand correctly, is that the soul is not limited by time and it has multiple points of view.
Yes.
Or maybe points of attraction. I don't know. The
soul, or what we call the higher self or the guiding intelligence, is a vast, formless, omnipresent consciousness. And it's also it's somehow everywhere, but it's also like this individuated consciousness unit, the same way that's the case in this layer, right?
Yeah.
So, but it is the dreamer of you. So like the same way that you fall asleep and you have these dreams, and every night your dream ends and you wake up back in your bed, your dreaming self has no idea, literally none, unless you're lucid. But your dreaming self has no idea that you're actually sleeping in a bed. Likewise, the physical incarnation has no idea that it is one of thousands, tens of thousands, or hundreds of thousands of incarnations that are being dreamed by an extremely intelligent presence.
And even when we speak about it,
It's outside time.
it's not really something I can feel right now. Maybe in some altered state.
Yeah. Well, I had no sense of it until the rewind dreams began to happen, and then until I actually started to discover this. So, and it wasn't just that, I told you there are multiple levels of this intervention or multiple levels of guidance. So one of them, actually I haven't shared this in a podcast yet, so this will be good. This is the first time I've said this that will be public, except for on my YouTube channel, it's there. I was in a dream, and I was calling my old boss, and I was holding the phone, and a call came into the phone. Now I'm not lucid, right? So I'm just dreaming, and my dreaming self like picks up the call, and the dream reality splits into two realities. So imagine having two dreams at the same time, or imagine your consciousness here and the dreaming consciousness being concurrently running simultaneously, and you have full perception of both. So yeah, I didn't even know this was possible, right? No, like no one told me this was possible. So this dreaming conscious splits into two realities, and in one reality I was not lucid, I was in the dream. In the other reality, I was completely awake and aware, had a kind of non-local group consciousness. These beings were sitting around a table, and on that side I was them, whereas in the dream I was me and not aware at all. So I didn't know that if consciousness splits, it could be aware and unaware at the same time.
Wow.
So the message from the table to me in the dream was this: if you do not live according to what you/we, because they're the same thing, have decided upon, your life will be full of misery and suffering. If you do live in accordance with what you/we have decided upon, your life will be full of happiness and joy. Suffering is by design to move you back to your original plan. We love you. We're always here for you. Goodbye. Click. That whole reality disappears. My consciousness as them disappears. I'm back in the dreamscape, non-lucid, and I wake up with full recall of the whole thing. And that was the beginning of my discovery of destiny. It exists. There is destiny.
Wow. So I felt like I've heard what you said, and it made me think about the relationship we have with, like, between the temporal self, the physical self, temporal self, the unconscious self maybe, and the eternal self, the higher self. And that message, and I thought to myself, so many times we feel like, oh, the guidance, whatever you want to call it, almost like abusive parents that telling us how to live, because the way you said it, it sounded to me, it triggered in my brain like a parent that is like, if you're gonna behave like I want you to behave, then you're gonna have fun. If not, I'm gonna spank your ass. So I know at some point, at some part in my being, that it's not the true full reality of the relationship, but at the same time, in some aspect of my being, it's like that sometimes.
Well, this is the thing. You are that guidance. It's just that guidance is from a deeper configuration. So it's not like this outer thing is telling you what to do, What it is that before this incarnation, many of us decided what was going to happen. There were certain things that had to be done when we entered this dream. And that's destiny. That is what destiny is. So the levels of you that are outside time are what are guiding the levels of you that are inside time. And that's you here, just inside time. So it's not like this, you could see it as a parent, right? But it was really just what was decided upon. And I don't know if that's the case for everybody. I don't know if this is the case for everybody, right? I can only speak to what has experientially been,
Yeah.
been the case for me.
I'm
So.
actually trying to discover these things. I thought like a while ago I had some realization about choice before life, and I made a video about that, and I just deleted it like a week ago because I just realized recently from learning and hearing a lot of other POVs of other people and stories, I realized that not all of us are being this like what you call destiny contracts. Some people say talk about contracts
Yes,
that we
that's right.
that we make. So
Yeah, that's right.
My theory right now, I would call it theory, because I'm not like, I cannot know this for sure and fully, but it seems to me from what I hear and what I learn that there's levels, there's a spectrum of autonomy, like free will, and there's also a spectrum of determinism between those two spectrums, like two sides of the same spectrum.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, there's many entry points into the Earth learning system. So I just described the one that was the case for me. But it's not the first time. It's not my first round on the rodeo in this place. So, but there's many different kinds of beings. There's many different kinds of realities. There's many different worlds. So, many different reality systems.
You interacted with like, is there a particular reality or like I don't know, plane that you?
At this point, no.
You mean like after 10 years of exploring them?
At this point, it's all the same. Like
Mm.
consciousness appears as this room the same way that it appears as the higher self. Like in this layer, in this state, reality, consciousness, experience is configured as this conversation you and I are having. In the higher self level, consciousness, experience, reality is configured as that plane of intelligence. So all of these levels and planes are concurrently existent, but they're all fundamentally reality and experience. So my emphasis on being particularly interested in any of them or one of them more than the others has
see that all of them are connected and similar in a sense. That's what you're saying?
No, all of them are actually the same thing. They just look different.
Oh, okay, I see. Like they have different like characteristics, but they're the same.
Yeah, so like in the higher self plane or in the higher self levels, the level of you there, the level of intelligence there is non-local, omnipresent, and outside time. The intelligence here is local, inside time, and is experienced. There's experience of the physical body. So that the configurations, the characteristics of that level are the ones I described. Omnipresence, non-locality, experiencing multiple realities, hundreds of thousands of realities simultaneously. Whereas this one is singular. But mind, experience, consciousness, it appears as non-locality the same way that it appears as locality. Like all experience are just different rooms. There's a quote in the Bible that says, "In my Father's house, there are many rooms."
Yeah, I remember that one.
Yeah. So reality is the house. And these different modes, these moments in time or these bodies, they're the rooms. So we forget ourselves in the rooms. But the fundamental truth is you never left your Father's house because you are your Father and the house. So
basically what you're saying, the rooms are still in the Father's house.
Yeah. You never get outside experience. You never get outside reality. You never get outside consciousness. It's just the same thing appearing differently.
How do you live your life? I mean, how do you integrate between that profound knowing that you're speaking of. And your everyday, like, you know,
Every
your
day, every situation, every condition is that. Every moment, everything that I do is awake. So
yes,
what's the problem? There's no integration. Like everything is inherently integrated. What is there to integrate?
like if we're speaking about, for example, death
Yeah.
in the 3D reality, you know, I lost someone that I love. I lost personally. I lost my cat a year ago. So she's alive, and I know that I've been getting messages from her, and she
Mhm.
came to my dreams many times and showered me with love and blah blah blah. But
Awesome.
yeah, but at the same, and I got a lot of messages, and the guidance showed me, you know, valid ways that I can tell for sure that's real. But at the same time,
Yep.
I feel the pain. So what I'm asking you
Of course.
basically is, you know, you're in your father's house, but what about the parts that doesn't feel his presence?
Well, that's the practice. The practice is to know all those parts and to know all those sufferings as that present. That's the practice. You know, everything is this unending stream of awakening. Everything. So yeah, I mean, I still get annoyed, you know, and you know, last year I went through a difficult separation and I suffered, you know, so I'm not completely blown out. So yeah, if you really, if yourself is really totally 100% gone like a Buddha, there's nothing there that's reacting, and I have experienced some time in that kind of configuration. Really, the mind, this reaching thing that the mind does, the glue of attachment and the glue of familiarity that you have with your personality story and with who you were in time and with all the things that you want to do and with all the people that you love, that glue was gone. Like the price of unconditional love is conditional love. It all was gone. But I'm not in that right now. So yeah, I can still slip up, you know, it happens.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the idea is what is apparently separate is actually not. So you can really begin to feel the presence, the awakeness of pain, the awakeness of suffering, and you can take everything that happens as a lesson. You know, it's ultimately for growth. One of the big things that was revealed in the simulations, because these are all like training programs that happen in sleep. I was in a room with a father and 3 sons, and these were not real. These are not. I don't know. I don't think they're real people, but
Yeah.
the objective was you need to tell this father who's an alcoholic that it's time to go. You know, you got to go out on your own. You can't stay with him anymore. It's not working out. So I felt that fear of expressing that to him, you know, and that hesitation. And eventually, like in the simulation, I said, you know what, Dad, I love you, but I can't stay with you anymore. You know, I have to go. And when that happened, the whole simulation disappeared. It was like this metallic room, and this beam went straight into the head of my dream, of me in the dream. And there was this blend of the past, the present, and the future. And this lesson, this insight was downloaded, and it said that the dream simulations actually, not only do they prepare you for conditions in the waking state, like conditions where you would have to have courage, but because this training is outside time, it reaches back and forth through time. So that moment that happened in present time of me saying to this dream dad while I was his son, they're like, Dad, I can't stay with you anymore. That reached backwards. I experienced that as reaching backwards all the way to when I was like 13, 14, where I confronted my dad about his issues, his addiction. And I said, you know, you really have a problem. And it took so much courage for me to say that. The courage from that moment when I was 14, it was the same courage that I was experiencing in this simulation, but it was like these two resonance points in time. And then there was more. It said the simulations in dreams are the same as simulations in life. You're confronted with different conditions, different situations, different lessons, different people, different challenges, so that specific growth responses can be elicited and chosen. And when you choose those, when you make the choice that breaks that cycle, the simulation ends, you learn the lesson, and you stop permitting that kind of abuse. You stop permitting that kind of person to be in your life. You stop permitting that kind of bullshit from yourself. And until you do, it will keep repeating. Why? Why does it keep repeating? Because reality life is attempting to teach us, but we refuse to listen. So we'll be presented with the same challenge, the same person, the same problem again and again until we do.
Yeah, that's the mirror aspect of reality. Actually, it's funny. I think it's like almost the first time we mention it because Kelvin knows how obsessed I am with mirrors. And I actually wanted to dive deeper into this topic with you. And specifically, I'm extremely curious about your experience with mirroring in OBEs and other altered states of consciousness that you perceived. I'm just curious about your experience with the mirroring side of reality, like that aspect of reality in different states, basically. That other than the state that I function mostly in my aware consciousness.
So you mean like states in where your mind or you arise as other beings, your consciousness arises in another being, or what do you mean?
I'll be more particular. Like, for example, do you see this similar or the same patterns of mirroring of reality also in the dreamscape, also in the astral realms?
And what do you mean by mirroring?
So I mean, I see our reality. Everything is basically a 360 degrees mirror, like you described it just 2 minutes ago. How we learn in this hologram, and it mirrors some aspects of us and teachings.
Okay, I get. Like this lesson feedback loop thing is what you're talking about, or like where you're being presented with your own stuff, like something that is inside you actually like meets you in reality. That's what you mean?
Yes, exactly.
That's even more so in altered states. I mean, a lot of what people are experiencing in initial out of body experiences before they're able to like really get out of the I guess the non-physical gravitation of the earth learning system's pull is shadow material. Like it's their own stuff. I mean, yeah, there are nasty non-physical entities, but in my first OBE, I was confronted with a shadow, and it terrified me. And I thought it was an entity. And Robert Bruce, the author of Astral Dynamics, he said in an interview, he was like, yeah, that shadow is actually a test from the higher self. Like it's your own fear personified. Can you overcome it? And I was like, whoa, that's a really interesting way of looking at that. And so he said, yeah, just proceed with the exit out of body and the shadow will disappear. And I was like, okay, I'll take it provisionally, let's try it. So I try to go out of body. The shadow appears in the corner of the room. My whole body erupts in terror, And I noticed that as it got closer to me, if I just relaxed and continued with the process, it stopped moving. So this was a fear-dependent phenomenon. It was the mirroring effect that you're talking about. So if I wasn't afraid, it stopped moving. So then I proceeded with the exit, came out of body for the first time. The whole room illuminated and the shadow was gone. And Robert Bruce was right. It really was just a test.
Crazy.
So,
I like almost identical experience.
Really? Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a very common phenomenon. It's called the sleep paralysis demon. Yeah, lots of people experience it. It's just a test. It's the first test before you break out of the physical layer. For many of us. Not Kelvin, apparently, but for many of us, yeah.
probably for Kelvin, that entity that do that test probably was like, oh, he's already ready. We don't need to test him.
Yeah, Kelvin's different, man. He went out of body and he just vanished into his higher self and experienced perfection, you know? So, but yeah, man, Yuval was great. Let's do a part 2.
I'm just getting to know you, and it was very fun. Thank you a lot, Ryan. It was super interesting, and I can't wait to hear more from you.
Yeah,
Thank
man.
you.
I'm looking forward to it, and we'll talk to you soon. Thanks, Kelvin.
Awesome. So, thank you, everyone that listened to this podcast. I hope you enjoyed like I did, because I had extreme fun, and I can't wait to see you next time.